I was a middle-aged man serving drinks at a company party in the middle of nowhere, trying to keep my boss in good spirits. As I approach my 32nd birthday, I can't shake the feeling of being stuck while my friends and colleagues pair off and marry. There's been no romance in my life, and while I know waiting won't bring any change, I can't seem to forget a particular person. This might be why I haven't felt the push to actively seek a partner. After my boss finally finished his long-winded speech, I took a break and headed for the restroom. I figured I could use some fresh air to clear my mind, so I wandered down the hallway of the bar. That's when I ran into her, the one I could never forget, my high school sweetheart, Susan. She had a more refined presence now, but there was no mistaking her. She stopped in her tracks when she saw me. "Jack," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. Then she fell silent. "It's been a while," I managed to reply. "I'm here with my boss." The truth was, we hadn't spoken in over a decade since our falling out, and I wasn't sure how to approach her. She responded that she was out for drinks with friends. Our brief conversation ended with a simple, "Well then," and we parted ways. Susan and I dated through high school and continued our relationship into college despite the distance. But we broke up during our job hunting phase. The fault was largely mine. Susan, brilliant and beautiful, was at a prestigious university and landed a job early. In contrast, I attended a less distinguished college and struggled to find work. My frustration grew as my job search dragged on, and my jealousy of Susan's success festered. Despite her efforts to support me and understand my feelings, I felt pitied and belittled. I lashed out with hurtful words, accusing her of not understanding and looking down on me. My bitterness only drove her away, and it was no wonder she eventually gave up on us. After parting ways with Susan, I secured a job at my current company, but we lost touch. In my 20s, I heard from a high school classmate that Susan had married and moved to Chicago because of her husband's job. I felt a mix of emotions, some sadness, but also relief. As long as she was happy, that was enough for me. Hearing about her marriage prompted me to move on as well. I went on a few blind dates, but none of them felt right. And so, here I am now. About a week after our chance meeting at the bar, I visited my favorite cafe after work. I had developed a passion for coffee during college and enjoyed buying beans here to brew at home. As I walked into the cafe, eager for a new batch, I was stunned to see Susan savoring a cake set. This was our second unexpected encounter. "We meet again," I said, trying to hide my surprise. "Are you here alone?" I explained that I often come here to buy coffee beans. "What about you? Aren't you with your husband?" "I didn't even know you were back from Chicago." Susan's gaze dropped, and she forced a smile. "My husband passed away 4 years ago. I've been living in Chicago since then, but I only recently moved back here." "I'm so sorry," I said, feeling a pang of regret. "I didn't know. That was thoughtless of me." After that, our conversation dwindled, and we said our goodbyes once more. Susan, now living alone in San Francisco, had lost her husband, and I was left with a desire to reconnect. But I struggled with feelings of unworthiness due to the hurtful words I had once said. A month later, on a stormy night plagued by a severe typhoon, I had my third unexpected encounter with Susan. As I passed by the crowded train station on my way home, the trains were either delayed or halted. In the midst of the chaos, I spotted Susan taking shelter from the rain, talking on the phone. She noticed me and called out. "Unbelievable, we meet again," she said, a hint of a smile on her face. "Yeah. Is the train stopped?" I asked, noticing Susan's bitter smile as she nodded. "It's stopped. I have no idea when I'll start again. And with both the buses and taxis packed, it doesn't look like I'll be able to get on any of them." I tried calling a nearby hotel, but no luck. Even without the typhoon, finding an available room is tough, and with the station so busy, it's not surprising. I noticed Susan's clothes and hair were drenched. Even though it was early spring, the nights were chilly. I handed her a handkerchief. "Here, use this. You must be cold." "Thank you." I had an umbrella, but the rain and wind were just too much, she said. As I approached her, the storm had just begun to abate, but the rain and wind had been fierce, and the sky looked ominous, hinting at more rain to come. I couldn't just leave Susan stranded without a way to get home or a place to stay. "Do you want to come to my place?" The offer slipped out before I could think it through. Immediately, I regretted it, fearing she wouldn't want to stay at her ex-boyfriend's home, especially after how we ended things. To my surprise, Susan's response was unexpected. Are you sure you're willing to let me stay? When I looked at Susan, her eyes were moist and pleading for help. Seeing her like this, I felt a pang of nervousness, but I also sensed her vulnerability. Sure, come on, I said. Susan's face lit up with a relieved smile, and she followed me to my apartment. Once we got home, I had Susan take a bath to warm up after being soaked. Watching her emerge with wet hair, wrapped in my clothes as makeshift pajamas, made my heart race. Despite my feelings, I tried to stay composed, knowing my intentions were purely to help. After she was finished drying her hair, Susan said, "I'd love some coffee. Could you brew it for me? I've been missing it." I noticed a bag of coffee beans and a grinder where she was looking. I used to make coffee for her often when we were in college. Sure, I replied, and began grinding the beans with care. Susan watched me closely, and I asked, "Do you want to try grinding the beans yourself?" She hesitated before saying, "Actually, I'll pass. I prefer you do it." "Jack, I've missed your coffee," she said. Her words, though possibly just polite, warmed my heart. As the coffee neared readiness, I asked, "How would you like it? Café au lait?" "Yes, you remember that," she replied. Susan had never liked black coffee when we were together, always preferring it with milk. I remembered her preference well. "Of course I remember," I said, handing her the freshly brewed café au lait. Susan cradled the mug in both hands and brought it to her lips. "Ah, it's delicious. The aroma is so soothing. I've really missed this. I've missed your café au lait." "After we broke up, I've been wanting to drink it for over 10 years, Susan said, her voice carrying the weight of those years. "I've been holding back for more than 10 years. The phrase more than 10 years felt like it was laden with meaning. I poured myself a cup of coffee just like we used to in college. Even now, I prefer it black. Drinking my own brewed coffee is part of my daily routine. But today, sharing it with Susan made it taste even better. As we finished our coffee, we turned to the topic of where we would sleep. Jokingly, I said, "I only have one bed. Is it okay if we sleep together?" I hoped to lighten the mood, expecting her to respond with a retort like, "No, it's not okay." To my surprise, she simply replied, "Okay." I was taken aback by her serious demeanor. "I've been lonely since my husband passed away," she said softly. I felt a strong urge to comfort her, but I was aware that her loneliness didn't necessarily mean she had feelings for me. Perhaps the stormy weather had intensified her sense of isolation. I worried that if we shared the bed or even the same room, she might regret it later, and I might too. So I decided to act on my instincts. "Susan, I'm sorry for my inappropriate joke. You can sleep in the bed. I'll take the couch in the living room. I don't want you to regret anything because of how you're feeling right now," I said. Susan seemed to anticipate my decision. She nodded without protest. "No, you're right. I'm sorry," she said. Her acceptance eased my concern. Despite my resolve not to get swept up in the moment, I realized that this might be my last chance to apologize for something that had long been on my mind. "Susan, I'm sorry for how things ended between us." "When did we break up?" "Do you mean the argument we had?" Susan asked, as if reconsidering whether the term argument even fit the situation. I realized I had never seen Susan as at fault during our relationship. From the start until the end, she was always the one who seemed to have everything together. Back in high school, I once wondered why someone like her would even date a guy like me. I was just an ordinary guy, mediocre at academics and sports, while Susan was the epitome of excellence. She was adorable, an honor student, popular with teachers, and academically gifted. I never understood what balanced us out. It turns out, Susan and I weren't strangers from high school alone. We had actually been in the same kindergarten class, a detail I had forgotten. I learned that I had protected her from bullies back then, earning me a kind of hero status in her eyes. Susan moved away before senior kindergarten, but she told me she never forgot me. I had no clear memory of this heroic act. I only vaguely recalled helping a girl, feeling like I was just showing off as a kindergartner. Susan often recounted this story from our kindergarten days once we were dating. I found it endearing at first, but as I faced rejection after rejection during job hunting, it began to wear on me. By the time I was dealing with my 10th job rejection, I was deeply disillusioned by how much salary and status seemed to matter. I felt like a failure, and Susan's successful job search and supportive nature only made me feel worse. I lashed out at her, saying, "Shut up. Everything is so perfect for you, Susan. You've always been a top student, got into a good college, and found a job right away. You don't know what it's like to be a failure like me. Susan's eyes filled with tears. Don't talk about yourself like that, Jack. You're my hero. But my frustration with my job search had reached its peak, and her words only fueled my anger. I'm tired of hearing that story. I don't remember anything from kindergarten. Stop imposing your ideals on me. I'm not your hero. In fact, I don't want to hear your pointless stories anymore. You're just annoying me. I still remember the look on Susan's face when I said that. It was a mixture of hurt and confusion, and it stung deeply. That day, I told her to leave, and she walked away with her shoulders slumped. Afterward, I ignored her repeated apologies, wanting nothing more than for her to be out of my life. Eventually, she called and said, "Let's break up." Given the harsh things I'd said, it felt inevitable. All I could manage was a simple, "I understand." As I reflected on those memories, Susan's voice brought me back to the present. She was laughing softly at my long overdue apology. "No, it's okay," she said, her voice warm and forgiving. "It's not all your fault," Susan said gently. Looking back, I realized I should have stepped back a bit and watched over you more. I was young and thought I had to always be there for you, to encourage you. But maybe that just added more pressure and made things worse. Maybe we were just too young for each other. I appreciated her kindness, even though I knew I was the one to blame. When we reunited in high school after being apart since kindergarten, I thought it was destiny, but I guess it wasn't meant to be. We really can't be together, can we? I had no answer to that. We slept in separate rooms that night, and the next morning, Susan was gone. The room felt cold, as if the temperature had dropped. On the table, I found a note from Susan. "If we meet again, I hope we can be together." Seeing the note, I rushed out of the house and ran toward the station. I caught up with Susan quickly. She was walking slowly, her eyes red from crying. I stood in front of her, took her hand, and held it warmly as I poured out my feelings. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'd regret letting things slide yesterday, but that was just an excuse. The truth is, I've always loved you, and I still do. I was just being a coward yesterday. I hurt you once, and I was afraid I couldn't make you happy again. I didn't think I could ever measure up to your late husband. I wasn't sure if I had the right to ask to be by your side. I was scared and couldn't say anything." Seeing Susan's shaky handwriting on the note, I realized she must have written it while crying. It tightened my chest, and I started running. "Susan, you said our reunion in high school was destiny. I feel the same way. I believe our meeting again now as adults is also destiny. I won't hurt you anymore. I'll cherish you in my own way without comparing myself to anyone else. So I want to be with you. Please give me another chance. Will you date me?" As soon as I finished speaking, I felt a bit embarrassed, talking about destiny at my age. But Susan seemed to share my feelings. She chuckled and said, "Sometimes you're such a romantic, Jack, but I love that about you." We smiled at each other, making eye contact. "Do you want to come back to my place? I'll make you a delicious cup of coffee, of course, a latte just for you. Let's talk about the past and the future." "That sounds great. I have a lot I want to talk about too," she replied. We walked hand in hand back to my place. Since then, Susan and I have been happily dating, and tomorrow, after a year, we are getting married. Today, we visited the grave of Susan's late husband. It's not the first time I've joined her in visiting his grave. Before I confessed my feelings to Susan, I worried whether I could make her as happy as her late husband did. But I realized it's not about comparison. I accept that he cherished Susan, and I'm committed to cherishing her in my own way. Visiting the grave was my way of showing respect and promising to protect Susan's smile. When Susan asked what I was thinking about during our visit to the grave, I kept it a secret, saying, "It's a secret conversation between men that I can't share." Susan smiled and said, "I'm curious," but her happiness was evident. After visiting the grave, we returned to our new home, our own home, to begin our life together. As I was about to make coffee, Susan mentioned she preferred juice. I was concerned and asked if she was feeling okay. Seeing my worry, Susan grinned and placed a hand on her stomach. "I'll have to skip the latte for now. The caffeine might startle this little one." Realizing what she meant, I couldn't help but shout with joy. I embraced Susan, exclaiming, "Our baby is due in 7 months. I'm so excited for this new chapter in our lives." "So how did you like our story?" Your support and subscription to our channel truly inspire us to create more content. We look forward to seeing you in the next video.